The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is Humor, Disability, and Hope.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's show. We are on episode 204. That's amazing. We have a very interesting guest tonight, and he has a unique perspective. I'm going to ask the question about faith and humor. We don't always think about humor when we think about faith, and tonight's guest views them as companions on the road toward hope. His name is Sy Hoekstra. Sy Hoekstra. It's spelled Hoekstra. You can look him up, and I'm sure after tonight's episode you will. He's a writer, editor, and podcaster whose story weaves together deep honesty and joyful perspective. He was blinded, or he became blind at a young age, and he brings first-hand insight into the realities of living with disability. But he refuses to let that hardship define his story. Instead, his writing explores faith in the language of humility, hospitality, and generous self-awareness, often delivered with a contagious sense of humor. Let's welcome Sy into the studio. Hello there, Sy. How are you today?
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. And tell me again, where are you dialing in from?
Manhattan.
And I'm in Brooklyn. But it's Brooklyn, Wisconsin.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought you were not here, but okay, good.
Let's just call it the Little Apple, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, Sy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show tonight. I know you and I have talked off and on over the last, I think, several months about doing this show together, and I've been looking forward to it. I shared with you, I don't know if the audience knows this, but I had a blind roommate my first year in college. His name was Dale Barta. I'm very certain he passed away a few years ago now. Didn't really keep in touch with him, but I mean, he made a big impression on me, learning to sort of, be a companion to him as in this new environment. He did quite well. And he also had a sense of humor, actually. So I've been looking forward to connecting with you and doing this show, and I guess I'll dedicate it to him. So, Sy, as we always do on the show, we want to know your creation story. We'd love to hear the events around your loss of sight, but beyond that, your early years, who your parents were, what shaped the forces that shaped and made you who you are today, and sort of your coming of age. So just dive right in.
Sure. I was born in North Dakota. You're a little bit closer to North Dakota than I am, but most of the people on the East Coast that I meet and tell them that, I'm the first one they've ever met. So I was born in Grand Forks. Then we moved around a lot in the Midwest when I was a kid. And then,
well, where does North Dakota fall on the scale of population? It's got to be pretty
darn low. I think the largest city has about 125,000 people, and they only have one congressman, right? It's one of the 3 representatives in Congress states. Yeah. So yeah, that's where my mom grew up. Her whole family. She was born in Minnesota, but her whole family is kind of from rural Minnesota, and then as in her generation, kind of moved into the cities in North Dakota. And so that's all very, I think, as far as I know, 100% Swedish side of the family. And then my dad moved there.
That's not actually sweet. I said, that's actually not Swedish. That's the Swedish chef. And there's nothing like that in Swedish. But that's what people think of when they hear Swedish?
I wouldn't have known either way, and I'm far enough away from that part of my heritage to be offended by you invoking the Swedish chef.
Well,
Um,
so Hoekstra, are you saying that's Swedish? It sounds
no,
Dutch
it's
to me.
not. No. That's my mom's side of the family. So
I see.
my dad's dad was an immigrant from the Netherlands to the U.S. And then my
I now have to speak a little bit of actual Swedish. 777 sjömän sjunger på sjön. Right? That is actual Swedish. And
didn't you live in Sweden for a while?
I did.
Okay, so you, instead of jumping to the Swedish you know from having lived there for a long time, you went straight for the Swedish chef.
Well, of course, because it's actually funnier, right? But
Oh, for sure.
the other thing I got to say in terms of Dutch, and no offense to your dad, Dutch is not even a language; it's a throat disease.
Now, okay, hang on. I will argue with you about this because I lived for 5 years in Switzerland, and if you've ever heard Swiss German, Dutch
Oh yeah,
sounds like a gorgeous symphony of sound.
yes, I don't disagree with that. That's
Yeah,
Swiss,
right.
right?
Uh,
So okay, good.
So yeah,
Sorry to derail you, but we're having a little fun. Go ahead.
no, it's fine. At
Tell
this
us
rate,
more.
we'll get to 2025 in a couple hours. My dad's dad was from the Netherlands. Dad's mom family goes way back in the U.S. Just a general American, like white American kind of Northern European blend. With one, my great grandfather was a Romanian Jewish man who fled from the pogroms to the U.S. But then I moved to Michigan, like 3 different places in Michigan, and then Illinois, and then New Jersey, all before I was 6. Just having to do with my dad's job, moved around a lot. When we were in Ann Arbor, Michigan, there was just a day where my dad took me to the park one day at sunset and noticed like a glint or a gleam in my eye that he thought shouldn't be there. It looked strange to him, so he took me to the doctor, and fortunately we had good healthcare access, and so a couple appointments later I was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, which is a rare childhood retinal cancer. And then basically over the course of a month, first they enucleated, which means removed. They took out my right eye, so my right eye is prosthetic. And then my left eye, they did a series of, I think it was 22 radiation, like laser treatments over the course of a month, which was, fortunately, I don't remember any of this, but my parents say it was absolutely brutal to be bringing their, toddler son into the hospital that frequently for like really painful procedures. And they killed the tumor in that eye. And so it's still there. It's just can't grow. It's dead. So I then grew up legally blind. Out of the one eye that was not prosthetic, I still had somewhat decent vision, meaning it's a little bit hard to describe, but with very thick glasses, I had still vision that was well within the range of legally blind, but I could see some things. Like I learned to read and write under a magnifying glass with a CCTV. That's sort of like one of those. It's like a camera that you put over a piece of paper, and then it shows up really big on a TV screen in front of you. So I learned to read and write that way. And then when I was 13, after we lived in New Jersey for about 7 or 8 years. So to simplify this whole story, for people, I will just say that I'm from New Jersey, but this is not the time for simplified stories, Wade.
No, it's not. You've got time.
So I moved to Switzerland when I was 13, again, as a part of my dad's job. And then a couple of years later, started having long-term, what they call retinopathy, basically side effects of the radiation. So my vision then, over the course of about 20 years, decreased to the point where I can almost not see anything anymore. Basically, what happened to me is the same thing that happens to diabetic people when they go blind, which is that kind of like floaters and flashers due to like blood vessels in the eye kind of cloud the vision until there's no real vision left. So over that time is when I learned how to use like a screen reader, which is the software that blind people use to interact with computers. That's when I started using a white cane. It was a couple of years after this retinopathy started. And I've been blind ever since. I moved to New York City in 2006 for college. And with just a couple of short stints in, with the exception of a couple of short stints in Chicago and Washington, D.C., I have been in New York City ever since. So about 17 years now total.
And what kind of work was your father doing that took him international?
Oh, the company that he worked for finance, a stock brokerage that was bought by UBS, the Swiss bank. So they just moved they moved a lot of people to Zurich after that. And then we were there for 5 years.
Eddie Bear 88 wants to know what year that was in Switzerland.
Oh, Eddie Bear, what's up, man? No, I don't know. 2001 to 2006.
Okay, because I and Eddie Bear, I actually lived in Switzerland as well. It was probably 1988, I would say. 88, 87, 88, 89, somewhere in there. I was living in Switzerland briefly, and then for a few years on the border. Not sure why Eddie Bear was asking, but now he knows, or they know. Now they know. Sorry, make assumptions. So, Sy, what was going on? You've told the facts, but you haven't told any of the inner experience.
Yeah.
So share a little bit of what was going on inside you through all this.
Yeah, totally. I think as a kid, because I was still okay. So my parents early on decided that they were going to adopt a posture of never telling me what my limits were. They were going to let me discover them on my own. And what that meant was I had a lot of freedom. I had a lot of it was incredible compared to unfortunately the way that some disabled people are raised, being very much told their limits, and their limits that they're told being much narrower and than they are in reality. But what that meant was I had a lot of confidence, but then also I took that in as a lot of pressure. Like I took that in as I should kind of be able to keep up with anybody and do anything, which my parents absolutely never said. It was what that was my own way that I interpreted. That's the kind of stuff that I had to work out later in therapy. You know what I mean? Why did I
Yeah,
think
and
that?
I'm gonna pause you there for a moment, because that's a really powerful observation in a bunch of different ways, right? To me, the essence there is, and we'll get into faith, and you may have some scripture. And I said I'm not going to quote a lot of scripture tonight, but this one comes to mind now, which says that you who compare yourselves among yourselves are not wise, but we all do it. We compare ourselves, and from keeping up with the Joneses, as it used to be called, even to some aspects of social justice these days. It's all about comparing yourself to what somebody else has or does or can do. And it's all well to play golf or tennis and to stretch yourself and compete, you know what I mean, to be the best you that you can be. But there's something toxic about this comparing ourselves amongst ourselves that is warned about in the pages of the Bible. It sounds like you had a little sense of that, this whole I can keep up with other people. And
it was very reasonable. Like as I've gone back and thought about it, meaning it felt really reasonable at the time, which was, I knew through a million different ways that people interacted with me, that people thought of me as different, that they had fairly low expectations of what I could do. And then, as I grew up, started to face like discrimination in different ways. And so I felt the way to combat that was to prove to everyone that I could do anything, like I thought, oh, I can afford myself some amount of safety or like a little cocoon of like protecting myself against people's low expectations by just constantly achieving, and that worked for a while. Like it really did. I was, I did well in high school. I had some ways that I was successful. Like I went to a good college. But it just like the longer you do that, the more toxic it becomes. I agree with you. And so I think I burnt me out in the end, and I had to just figure out a different way to live and to interact with other people and their expectations and reactions toward me.
Yeah. So when you say you went through therapy, what was the sort of aha or epiphany out of all that, if
Okay,
there
this
was one?
this was funny. I went to therapy for reasons completely unrelated to blindness or anything like that. And it was my first time in therapy. It had more to do with completely unrelated things going on in my life. And I went into the therapist's office and started talking to him about these other problems. And this therapist, who was very smart, very quickly picked up on the fact that I had a lot of unprocessed grief about the way that people interacted with me as a disabled person. And I like the first time that he very, in a very gentle therapist way, kind of breached this subject, my immediate reaction was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I'm not going into therapy and having a sighted person tell me that the actual source of all my problems and the reason I'm really sad is because I'm blind." Like, I'm going to deal with the
Hmm.
problems that I came in to deal with, and I'm not gonna like just kind of be pigeonholed that way. And this guy was not pigeonholing me at all. He was using his professional expertise to correctly identify problems that I had, but it took me a little while to get there. Um, and by the way, sorry if you hear some sirens in the background. As I said, I'm in Manhattan. um, but for me, it was the first time that I would think I was able to articulate the way that I, uh, not the way, just the fact that I was able to articulate that those expectations to me that I've been talking about like very, very like openly and clearly now, um, was a huge, like, I could feel it. I could literally feel like a weight in my chest, like a physical sensation, like being acknowledged. Like when I was sitting there in therapy saying like, I do not like the way people treat me. It makes me feel terrible. I wish they would stop. I remember one time I actually like hit the couch like really hard that I was sitting on. Like I just punched the guy's couch basically in like anger. And so that was kind of all the confirmation I needed. I was like, okay, this guy's right. Because the moment I say anything about this, I'm like having this physical sensation in my chest of like a burden being acknowledged. And I think for anyone who's done a lot of therapy, you kind of understand that acknowledging a burden is somewhat lifting the burden at the same time. Just because your nervous system, your body, your brain is trying to tell you stuff through the anxiety and the frustration that you feel, right? And then the moment that you acknowledge the stuff that you're feeling the anxiety from, it starts to lift. Um, so I think that was the first aha moment in therapy.
I'm uh I'm playing this little snippet of a song from Abbey Road right now. Boy, you got to carry that weight.
Yeah.
Carry that weight a long time.
Hmm.
All right. So, coming of age, sort of, life changing or life direction moments. As we go into the break here, was the therapy part of that? When did you come to realize that you should focus on humor as more than just a passing joy?
Oh, that was very recent, actually. That was it's something I've done a little bit here and there, but I as a kid very quickly like took to anything funny that I was reading or watching or listening to. Um, I'm writing humor now. I don't know if you are familiar with Dave Barry. I started reading
Yes,
Dave Barry
very
when I
much.
was about 10 years old.
That's
um,
that's the age I'm at as well. No, I
yeah,
remember. Wow.
right. Well, he's still writing actually. I'm on Substack and so is Dave Barry.
Well, there
um,
you go. Good company.
but yeah, right. Um, so anyways, I would read that. I would watch anything that I could get my hands on. I would watch like seasons of sitcoms and then go back and watch the whole season again with the director's commentary on. Like I was just someone who very naturally wanted to dig into like the nuts and bolts of how comedy worked because it brought me so much joy. And I think a lot of hope because I think I felt very early on that to laugh in the face of the absurdity of the world is in itself to express some amount of hope. Um, and I, at some point in college, just like I think this had a little bit to do actually with like the way that I understood like calling and vocation and job. I don't know what you should do for your job from church, like the, you know, faith and work and all that. I think at some point I just decided that really going for and trying to make like a career out of humor or creativity or whatever was not like sufficiently meaningful. You know, it wasn't like changing the world and like going out and transforming things the way that so much of the, I don't know, theology around faith and work that I heard growing up made it seem like you had to do. You had to go do something big and powerful and influence culture, and you know.
Well, some people may have heard the name Norman Cousins. He wrote a book called Laughter is the Best Medicine. He had a chronic crippling disease called ankylosing spondylitis, and he healed himself with laughter. Lo and behold, I was 28 years old in an eye clinic in Germany. I was about to lose my eye. I did not, but I was told that what I had was a chronic crippling autoimmune disease that was going to put me in a wheelchair by age 40. That book by Norman Cousins was one of the many books I read that really helped me put the thing in full remission. And I could stand up. You couldn't see me standing up, but I could stand up right now. I'm not in a wheelchair. And so, you know, certainly it was transformative for him as an individual, right? And yeah, so I don't.
I'm not
dismiss, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying, but yeah. Go ahead.
I'm not arguing that it that it is not important to.
I'm endorsing.
Yeah,
you.
Exactly. I'm just saying that's, I think, where I kind of went awry. You know, I ended up going to law school, and then I, you know, like you said, I was a lawyer for several years, and I kind of liked the things that I learned and some of the things that I was able to accomplish as a lawyer, but I absolutely hated the actual day-to-day work of it.
Was that part of your like I can do anything phase? And
in a lot of ways, yes. I mean, when I was a senior in college, going along the track of what I thought was meaningful in my understanding of that word, like meaningful work, I was kind of like, at one point I was trying to decide between seminary and law school, thinking that as a seminarian I could do something else that I'm passionate about, which is helping people live in line with the teachings of Jesus. But I talked to a few people who were former lawyers turned ministers, and they sort of told me to go to law school because it's helpful with, you know, a whole lot of different things. And I ended up there, and then I got into I went in with the zeal of the late 2000s evangelical desire to fight human trafficking. If you're not from the evangelical world, you may not be familiar with that particular strain of evangelical justice work, but by the time I left law school, that's not what I was doing at all. But I then ended up at a court for a while, and then I ended up at a public defender in family court for a few years, which was very important and meaningful work, but also brutal and burnt me out. And I exactly what you just said. I really felt that because there were some people who were able to do that work, that I should be able to do that work, like on a permanent basis, right? Oh. And it's just absurd because I think like most people looked at like all the attorneys like running in and out of courtrooms and like helping their clients and doing all the stuff that trial attorneys do. And then you see a blind person come along doing all the same thing, and you're going, wow, how does he do that? And all I'm thinking is, why can't I do more? Right. And that's.
Did you ever read or watch Daredevil?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
wasn't he a lawyer? And
yes, I am a blind white male attorney in Manhattan. I got all the Daredevil jokes, man. I was,
well, you know, they aborted that whole show early. I was like really into it, and they just kind of crash landed it.
They restarted it. There's like, I don't know, 10 more episodes on Disney Plus now or whatever. It's not as good as the old show, but yeah, I was literally a few times I was literally in the courthouse where Matt Murdock, fictionally works. So yeah.
Wow. Well, that may be a good time to go to this little commercial break to segue back and let crash land this plane back to where we're supposed to be. Don't go anywhere. We're going to learn a little bit more about Sy Hoekstra, through this little video. And when we come back, we will dive into faith and humor and how he does that. Don't go anywhere. This is Created in the Image of God. We'll be right back.
Have you ever imagined what it's like to be blind? To live in the world without being able to see it? To transform the way you engage with your senses because one of them is gone? Well, if you have imagined it, please stop. Why would you try to imagine something you don't know anything about? Just listen to actual blind people. Specifically, me. I'm going to bring you humor and stories about my adventures in blindness. Living in this world as a disabled person is absurd, but we still have a good time. I'm Sy Hoekstra, and this is Deep Sy. It's a pun! Listen at deepsy.net or wherever you get podcasts.
So I got to confess, I laughed the first time I heard that, and I enjoyed it even more the second time, which is the second time I've seen that. And now I got to ask you, there's a tiny hint of sarcasm in the way you put that together, right? And here's what I mean by that. You sucker us in a little bit with that opening, which is very much, I don't know, it's not exactly tongue in cheek. It's you know what I mean? Because what you said, and I'm this is how my mind works, right? I maybe over process, but you said earlier that you really didn't like that people treated you differently. But you play on that a little bit because you sucker us in, and we're immediately like empathetic with, oh, maybe I should be imagining what it's like to be blind. Right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's part of the whole humor. And I don't know if I'm overanalyzing it or getting any part of it right, but I just love the way you did that. But those are some of the elements that make it juicy to me.
Yeah. Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't. Here's a blind moment. My screen reader is apparently having some issues interacting with the Restream software, and it was telling me that my mic was muted when it was not. I suspected it was wrong. Anyways,
it was muted. It was muted during the video.
Yes, right. Okay. So anyways, that was exactly the aim. Yeah, I was I think like a lot of people who know me would from those first, they would tell me later, like from those first 15 seconds or whatever, we're going, this can't be the vibe of what Sy's doing. There's no way this is his his angle on things. But yeah, I think I get a lot of actually, discrimination and people or not even discrimination, but also just people treating me, I don't know, in pretty ridiculous ways sometimes, specifically because they are filling in the gaps of what they don't know about how blind people exist in the world with just whatever they imagine in the moment, And so I very much want to play off of that. I think there's unfortunately a lot of media out there that, kind of sees disabled people as very inspiring, but does not really show much of like realistic disabled lives. So you'll get, the main draw, the main focus of the disabled character in like some piece of media will be how they overcame the disability, right? It's like, and like for me, that's directed at someone who is not disabled, right? They look at someone who is disabled and like there's a lot of confusion about how would I live that way, right? If you just like closed your eyes and went, actually, here's a good example. There's a lot of times you will see people like wearing a blindfold or, blackout goggles or something in an attempt to empathize with blind people and like go around, try and walk around, try and go around with a guide, try and experience the world the way that blind people do, which is not a bad instinct. But the problem is that's not what it's like to be blind. That's what it's like to be blind for the first 5 minutes, which is not how I am blind, right? I don't wake up every morning and go, oh my gosh, I'm blind, like freak out and tell my wife we have to go to the emergency room. I wake up every morning and I have a completely routine morning, pretty much the same as anybody else's, just without vision. But it's like very difficult to know if you're not someone who is blind, how that happens, right? Because to have a boring routine blind morning takes practice, right? Like it takes a reorientation to the world. It takes like figuring out how to do a whole bunch of things, like make a pot of coffee or whatever without being able to see it. And so it's not really something that you can like imagine or just experience cold, without any introduction. So in my opinion, the best way to do it is to interact with, in any way you can, actual blind people. So that's kind of the thrust of that little trailer.
Yeah, so it kind of gets into a bigger question of what really is empathy, and how do we use empathy in a positive way?
Yeah.
That's sort of a rhetorical question. I'm not expecting you to necessarily be able to answer it, even though I know you can do anything.
Good. I'm glad you're catching on. No, I mean, I do have thoughts on it. Like, I do think,
Well, please.
I think it is typically unhelpful to like, this is complicated because the word empathy in a lot of ways has become very political. But if we're ignoring the politics of it for a moment and just talking about the dictionary definition of the word, I think it is really hard to empathize with people who have like vastly different experiences than you do. And a better way to think about it would probably be, I'm going to learn as much as I can and reference whatever I have in my own life that is similar, to try and, like, if not directly understand what those experiences are like, at least like interact with that person or people like them in a way that is sympathetic, that is like coming from a place of just being open and curious and generous, as opposed to filling in all the gaps and believing that I have like a solid grasp on the situation when I really don't know much about it. And that's something that you can actually, like, that doesn't just apply to blindness or disability, right? That's a good way to approach any human being you encounter.
How would you what would you compare it to that some of us might actually have experienced this whole, your 6th year of blindness? I mean, you kind of did a little bit, but go deeper into that.
That's a good question. Yeah, I think there are some somewhat obvious comparisons where if not the day-to-day experience, you can at least get some idea of what it's like. If you've ever been in any situation where you are the fish out of water. So like this could be something like, when you lived overseas, right? Or if you are, the only woman in a company full of men or whatever. If you are the person who has a very different experience than the people around you don't understand how that experience works, and are like a little bit clueless that there is another experience for them to understand, then I think you can kind of graft a lot of those dynamics onto the experience of being blind, even if you don't understand how to make a pot of coffee while blind. So that's one.
How about that sort of foreign language experience? Because you also lived overseas, as I have. I've often thought that, and I've been told I'm very good at languages. I'll confess, I am very good at languages. I speak several of them, and I speak them fluently. I'm almost, you might say, gifted when it comes to learning foreign languages.
Mhm.
People have asked me, well, how do you do that, right? And my answer is, one of the things that has helped me is you got to be able to laugh at yourself, which gets back to the humor thing. Because
Absolutely.
if I'm not afraid of people laughing at me for sounding like an idiot, because in my head and in my experience, I'm completely incompetent in this. I know I sound ridiculous. I know they probably think that, what a moron, right? Pardon if that's offensive to anyone, that term. I don't know if it's a politically incorrect term or not. But, this guy is clueless, and like, I remember in France or Germany, I'd speak French or German to them and they would speak English back to me, right?
Yeah.
like, I'm not doing this with this guy.
They're like, please stop.
Yeah. And I wouldn't care. And we'd have these really absurd conversations where I would speak to them in my terrible German and they would answer back in their terrible English.
Oh, that's funny.
And this would go back and forth because I was not going to let them talk to me in English, right? But I didn't care that I was embarrassing myself and making myself look stupid and foolish in their eyes. And if they might have laughed at it too, or they certainly went home and told their partner what an idiot they had in their store today, But it's that, right? It's that ability to maybe be able to laugh at yourself a little bit. Well, actually, I'm on a different topic now, but having to learn a foreign language maybe would evoke some of the stress and frustration that I'm sure is felt at being in a world where you really can't do what everybody else can. And maybe me insisting on speaking German was like you going and studying law in a way.
Well, it's kind of, so the way that's not the same is if you're studying law, meaning blind people can study law just fine. Like I did it. It was possible. It wasn't something I enjoyed, but it was totally possible for me to do. I think that a closer analogy might be if you were in a scenario where someone was like refusing to speak English to you, even though your German was terrible, like you had to get something done, because I feel like that's a lot of the
Okay, now that happened in France. The people in France were like that. Right? They could speak French, but they weren't going to. They were going to make you fumble around and then laugh at you.
Yeah, that might be closer then, because then you're a lot of the like impediments. I think this is a misconception that a lot of people have. The majority of the impediments that I face as a blind person are artificial, are created by the fact that the world was built or designed in a certain way, or that people are coming at me with an ignorant perspective on how my life works. That's where most of it is coming from. So that's where the frustration lies, is that so much of it is changeable. So much of the difficulty that I face is changeable, and it isn't being changed. Because like day to day, I don't really, to me, the figuring out how to do things in a different way because I can't see, like those are just problems to solve, and I know how to solve most of them. And like when new ones come up, I have strategies in place. Like that's just kind of a matter of time and energy. So sometimes it's more time and energy than I would want, but that's not the stuff that like really gets at me emotionally,
Yeah, so I think that's helpful. I'm getting a little bit of a sense.
Mhm.
So then let's switch tracks and talk a little bit about the humor. How do you do that humor? Where do you do it? Where can people pick up on that, other than that little video we saw?
Yeah, Deep Sy is the main place. If you get on the free email list there on Substack, then I'll keep you posted on other things that I'm writing or doing as well. But yeah, that's where I write kind of regular humor pieces, usually true stories that I am putting humorous twists on, and occasional other things. Like I just wrote in full Dr. Seuss rhyming verse a story of a sighted Grinch and the Blind Who's, which that's like the most recent thing that I put out. But anyways, I also occasionally write for other websites or publications or whatever. But was the question also like where it comes from, like how I do it?
Yeah, some examples of the type. You mentioned Dave Barry. What are some other touchstones of humor that appeal to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, in terms of writing, because I'm doing nonfiction, like stories about my life, I would say David Sedaris is a big one. Politically, like I think when I was a kid, I got a hold of Jon Stewart and the team at The Daily Show wrote like a fake American government textbook, like a satirical textbook called America the Book, and I think I read that about 15 times when I was in high school. So those are kind of the things where I started with the writing. I listened to a lot of stand-up growing up, but I think now I would say most of the humor I listen to is either, or I guess it is all listened to, isn't it? I was going to say consume, but it's all listened to in my case. Is either like sitcoms or there's a lot of like indie humor out there on podcasts now. So a lot of improvisers now have podcasts that I think are really great. But yeah, touchstones for my writing, I think like Dave Barry, David Sedaris, Jon Stewart are probably the the trifecta. But yeah, I mean, I'm just constantly taking it in from a lot of different sources. So
Awesome. And the humorous writing that you do is, it sounds like you've done that in a few different styles. Is it
yes,
is it experimentation? Have you found a groove?
I mean, I've found a groove with writing these personal stories, which has been really fun. Um, and then I experiment off of that. So like I said, I wrote that like sort of Dr. Seuss style poem. I did another episode that was like like a parody news style radio broadcast, talking about like disability news. I've been writing for this website called The Squeaky Wheel that does kind of Onion style disability parody news. You know the Onion, like the parody news
Absolutely, I
organization.
love the Onion.
Yeah. So they do that, but it's all stories about disability written by disabled authors. So I've been doing that. I just had one published that was like about a paraplegic architect who built a building for a town, and then when he unveiled the building, the only entrance was on the roof, and there was a note pinned to it that said, "Now, how do you like it?" And it was all about the, and then the whole story is then about the town, like trying to get people in and out of this building and all the effort that they have to go through and how they're so angry that they can't get into their building every day. And it's just the experience of anybody who has a mobility disability, but what if it happened to everybody? So I've done those kinds of like in that parody news style as well.
Well, great. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to dive into a little bit some of the scriptural references and
Sure.
You mentioned Jesus. So we're going to just quickly air this little ad, and when we come back, we'll get into that. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Discover the world's religious traditions like never before with Ocean 2.0 Reader. Our custom ebook reader is designed for exploration and study with an immersive audio integrated reading experience and powerful research tools available on all platforms including web, Windows, macOS, Linux, Android, and iOS. Experience the benefits of immersive reading by combining ear and eye with improved comprehension and vocabulary acquisition. Our interfaith library features books from various religions, so you can have access to a wealth of knowledge. Try Ocean 2.0 Reader today and elevate your reading experience.
And after that word from one of our sponsors, let's dive into some of the texts that are being referred to in that e-reader. So it's often said, God has a sense of humor. I heard recently, if you want to hear God laugh, make a plan.
Mm-hmm.
But where do you from when you refer to Jesus and the connection with humor?
I think it's like I said in the little intro that we did, the pre-clip that we did, the promo video. I have a lot. I draw a lot on Jesus's teachings about people who take themselves too seriously, who prop themselves up as authority figures that need to be listened to, that can put weights on people's backs, unnecessary burdens. People who think that it's kind of their job or position or lot in life to make other people believe that they are great. Jesus is more harsh toward them than anybody, by far, I think. Meaning he is extremely kind and gracious toward the people that are in many ways, marginalized or cast out or pushed out from society. And then he turns around and calls, the religious leaders a brood of vipers or whatever. That's, I think, his general disposition toward kind of the people in the world who are, sometimes it's about power and not having power. Sometimes it's about humility and pride. But it's that. And I think humor is a incredible, like one of the most powerful tools that we have to stop people from taking themselves too seriously, and from for exposing the fiction of people when they take themselves too seriously. Meaning, I think a lot about the passage where Jesus says that religious leaders who want the best place at the table, who want people to hear them pray in the public square and laud them for doing so, that they have their reward. And I think when Jesus says that, he means their reward is actually quite shallow. Like whatever you have in that moment, you have that place of honor.
It is that is actually pretty fun. I was trying to think, some of those imagery, it's not really funny at all, but that is funny, right? You have your reward.
Yeah.
That's
You are
true
working
funny,
so hard. You got a
like-
15-second round of applause for that prayer that you did. That's it.
Right.
That's all you get. You get nothing else,
Yeah.
And Jesus is trying to point people towards something deeper. And I think when you have people who can poke a little bit at the ego and the power grabs of people who are trying to prop themselves up and make people laugh and acknowledge like the absurdity of it through their laughter, I think that gives the powerful people the opportunity to rethink how important or how long lasting or how sure what they're gaining through their power is. And I find a lot of comfort in the fact that the God I worship sees that as important.
Yeah, I'm some things that are kind of funny, right? Is the imagery, you strain at a gnat and swallow a camel, right?
Yeah.
One of the maybe more humorous ones. But then I
mean, a
think
log
I
in your
don't know if you've ever seen that. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say the image of the log in your eye. It like that's just a he's literally talking about someone who has a log sticking out of their face, looking at somebody else and going, "Hey, you have something in your eye," right? Like that's just a joke. Like that's meant to evoke laughter. That imagery, and I think there's a lot of things like that.
Yeah, there's also this. The imagery is pretty powerful. There's the whole camel going through the eye of a needle. It's verily I say unto you that a rich man will hardly enter the kingdom of heaven. And then again, I say unto you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Somebody, this is an aside, but somebody just pointed out to me, I never noticed the difference there. And he pointed it out because he was explaining how Matthew, Mark, and Luke use the terms differently. Kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God. They're used interchangeably, but there's actually maybe a difference between them. And in this case, a rich man would hardly enter into the kingdom of heaven. But then he says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, which kind of like ups the ante, but harder to get into the kingdom of God. That's a theology question for another day. But
oh, interesting. Okay.
There's this imagery. So have you ever seen that scene in, I think it's the Holy Grail, about the holy hand grenade?
Yes.
So I guess
with the rabbit who's decapitating people, yes.
Yeah, but it's the holy hand grenade Bible reading that really cracks me up. And that's kind of sacrilegious, right? There's a part of me that doesn't want to laugh, to be honest, because they're taking the mick, as they say in English, in England, out of the way the Bible is written. But at the same time, they're not, because what they're actually poking fun at is the pompousness, right?
Yeah.
It's the taking oneself seriously that you're talking about.
Yes, and I think even the language, like what they're poking fun at, is basically the language of the King James Bible, that's not the Bible, man. That's the translation. That's like we're talking about just how people wrote in a very pompous manner in 1605 or whenever that Bible came out, right? And it's I think I'm happy to poke fun at that, at the pompous language and how that makes us I feel like the pompous language, maybe pompous is too strong a word, but like I think people find authority in just the way that the King James Bible sounds. Um, and you don't need that, man. Like we don't need to add authority to God through through like a specific use of an old version of English, right? So I have no problem poking fun at that.
Yeah, and of course they're coming from a world where, even a foreign is used, right? Latin. So you really had no clue what was being said, but you had to listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any other sort of themes or words of Jesus in particular that inspire this humor?
I mean, I think this is maybe, I don't know that this is something that people will feel as much as I feel. But there are two angles to, I think, Jesus' general philosophy that I had. One of them I love, and one of them I had a lot of difficulty with. And the one that I had a lot of difficulty with is actually the one we already spoke about in a sort of implicit way, which is, Jesus kind of leveling the ground between people. Jesus saying that no individual person is more or less valuable than any other. I am happy when Jesus says that no one is more valuable than me. I'm not particularly happy when Jesus says that I'm not more valuable than anybody else. Because like I said, I had that feeling, I had that sense that I had to prove myself as outstanding in order for people to in order for people to take me seriously. And so I like implicitly never really liked the notion, and I didn't articulate this for many, many years, but didn't like the notion that in the sort of economy of people's value, when it comes to Jesus, I couldn't stand out, right? But I, like, in a way, I had to be humbled a lot in order to be able to laugh more at the situation and treat it with the kind of lightheartedness that I think, not that it deserved, but the lightheartedness that allows me to have more hope. And then I think the opposite end of that is the real answer to your question, which is the idea that nobody is more valuable than me, and that nobody is, like, the ways that people value able-bodiedness, the way that people value being able to see or being able to, like, do great feats of athletic prowess, or the way that people, value, like, in terms of, like, socially value, economically value, whatever. Those are nothing to Jesus. Like, those are dust in the wind. Like, those don't matter. Like, those are the rewards, that you have now. You have your reward, right? It's your money, it's your popularity, it's your fame. And the fact that Jesus is constantly pointing out the thinness and the temporariness, is that a word? The fact that is such a temporary reward, and then he is getting people to look for things beyond, allows me to then spend time and energy joking about things that people take seriously, if that makes sense. Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that humor can serve as a mirror, right? A mirror is really
Yeah.
important if we can use it properly. I'm thinking now of David and Saul. There's, by the way, we've just recently watched The House of David. A lot of violence in it because it was a violent time, but wow, is that well done, in my opinion. It's a show on Amazon Prime. You have to pay. We paid $3.99 for a 1-month trial of the second season.
Huh.
First season was free, but anyway, just amazing. But really brought to life stories that I've read many times, talked about. But the reason I bring it up here is God anointed Saul king. You want to talk about a sense of humor, and not that this is funny, but it's really almost bizarre, and it relates to our day to day in a way. And I just did a 9-part series on No Kings, talking about this period, and this was before I started watching this thing on the House of David. But anyway, so there was no king in Israel, right? It was the time of the judges, And it's this horrible story of, as it concludes in the final verse, there was no king in Israel in those days, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And it's just story after story of the most atrocious, stupid, horrible things happening with this former slave people who are now entered into the Holy Land and the Promised Land. And then so at the end of it, the people want a king. So they go to Samuel, who's like the last judge, and they say, we want a king. We want to be like the nations around us. And Samuel is distressed, and he goes to God, and God says, they haven't rejected you, Samuel. They've rejected me. Go tell them this is what the king's going to do to them, and that they shouldn't want a king. So Samuel goes and tells them, God said, this is what the king's going to do, and you won't like it. And they said, we don't care. Give us a king anyway. We want to be like the nations around. So Samuel anoints Saul. And Saul is a great king for a while. He helps them conquer their enemies. He's a big man. He's powerful. And he's a great king for a while until he's not. And then Samuel goes and anoints David while Saul is still king, which is hilarious in a very tragic way.
Yeah, it's chaos.
You think about this. So God did this. He created this mess, right? Because now Samuel is treasonous. And this is what I never realized. Samuel is treasonous because he anoints a new king while the king that he anointed is still sitting on the throne. And then he expects David to submit to Saul until God takes care of it. But so it's just this bizarre situation that's really fascinating that we should study into and think about when we start getting up on our high moral horse politically about what's going on in this nation. But anyway, the point I'm making here is God says, I'm getting to notice now the connection was lost. I'm reconnecting. Can you hear me, Sy? Okay, so
Yes.
What God says to Saul about why he did this, he says, when you were small in your own eyes. So being king went to Saul's head, and he started thinking he was the one that was bringing these great victories. So when you're small in your own sight, and humor, laughter, not taking ourselves too seriously, something that simple could maybe be part of the antidote.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the constant, like God opposes the haughty, but lifts up the humble, right? Like that is the constant orientation of God, like I said before.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to have the last word. We're almost out of time, so let me give the mic back to you. What do you want to leave the audience with tonight as we wrap this up?
I think maybe where that trailer was leading people in the direction of get really curious about people's experiences around you and be willing to laugh at yourself and your own bits of ignorance, knowing that all of us have them. And I think, man, if more of us were able to do that, we would have a whole lot easier time interacting with each other in a personal and communal sense.
Wonderful. And Deep Sy, S-Y, is it deepsy.com? Where do people find that?
It is deepsy.net. And if you're already on Substack, it is a Substack website, so you can just go there. You can also, in any podcast player, just look for Deep SY, and you will find the podcast version of
That's a whole lot easier than trying to remember how to spell your last name, but go ahead and spell it for us.
Hoekstra. That's a very Dutch last name, pronounced Hoekstra.
And how do the Dutch say it?
That's how they say it. I mean, it would be more like Hoekstra, but it's they roll their R's, so I can't do it as well as a lot of my relatives.
So it's not guttural though in that sense.
It's not like German or French.
I was thinking it's more like sort of hacking something.
Yeah, no, it's not that.
Because now I got to do my Danish impression, right? For, you know what they have for breakfast in Denmark? Because the joke about Dutch being a throat disease, it's really a joke I tell about the Danish, because the Swedish-Danish rivalry is real. I actually love the Dutch. I love the Danish too, but I really like to pick on them. So this is what the Danes have for breakfast. You know, we have porridge, right? You might call it oatmeal and milk. The Danes have.
Were those words? Were those real words?
Those were real
Okay.
words. That's red porridge with milk.
Wow.
Wow. Sorry, couldn't resist. We're talking about humor after all. So deepsy.net, and then it's Deepsy on Substack.
Yeah, on Substack or your podcast player, you'll find it all there.
Deep SY for Deepsy. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life and joining us here on the show. One more time, if there's anything else you want to say, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll go to the sneak peek for next week.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's really been my pleasure. We didn't really get to interact much with the audience comments here. I apologize. Let me see if there's anything here I really want to. Well, Slater Gator was, when we were trying to sort of come up with an analogy here. Slater Gator said, think of it like this. There's a handful of people who have a sixth sense. I've met them. We all have a disability compared to them. We never think about it because we're not used to have a sixth sense. What's that guy who saw dead people in?
Yeah, the little kid from The Sixth Sense.
And the fact, so Rocky765V said the fact that any of us are here and even listening, seeing, interacting with each other is a miracle for so many reasons. So thank you all for showing up and enjoying this time here with Sy. And go check out Deep Sy on Substack, podcasts, and .net. I have nothing left to do than to play the sneak peek, but I do have a really quick 90-second video and an announcement to make before we actually share the sneak peek. So Christmas is coming up. The next week's show is actually December 23rd, which is the night before Christmas. And I have a very special guest on who inspired me to fast forward to launch this program called Facets of One. Facets of One is a new book that is a collection of 9 devotional readings that are intended to be done in a group. So the tagline of this show, Building Vibrant Communities, will now have a companion piece that you can do in your homes or in your local, wherever you want to meet to do this devotional gathering. In these collection of 9 different readings, it starts with the fact that there's only one God and that he is the God of everything, right? All peoples. And he, as Sy was pointing out, he's not a respecter of persons, as Jesus said, right? And all over the world, people come to worship that same God. They have different names for him. We talked about languages. There are different names for that God. There are also different messengers that have brought messages to different people around the world from that same God, inspired by that same God. This little book of devotional readings will help you explore some of that in a setting with a group of other people. The guest that's coming on next week is going to focus on Judaism and Christianity. The Facets of One goes beyond just those 2 religions, which are in the Bible, and goes into a broader collection of readings that are really transformational, heartwarming, and soul-opening as you read them and realize, for example, that the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one, is available in almost every religious text in some format or other, that God is one and that he's there for us. So there's a quick 1-2 punch here, a 90-second video that illustrates the show that's with this guest, which is part of the launch, which you'll be hearing more about on the show, and then the sneak peek itself. So sorry for the long-winded intro to all this. Hope you're still there. I'll play those now, and we'll see you all next week. Until then, remember, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. We'll see you next week.
The birth of Jesus was heralded by angels praising God, saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." Yet across history, faith has just as often become a fault line. Jesus himself warned that belief could bring not peace, but a sword of division. We can see that sword's edge in our headlines, in our streets, and too often in the Holy Land itself. Religious unity may well be the last great challenge for our species. a task as profound as any scientific breakthrough, as urgent as any peace treaty. The prophets gave us a picture of what that unity could look like. The lion lying down with the lamb, the Lion of Judah and the Lamb of God, strength and vulnerability, justice and mercy, sharing the same field without fear. Nowhere is that struggle more visible than in Jerusalem, a city where synagogue, church, and mosque stand within earshot of one another. A city of scars and sanctuaries, where division is real, but so is the possibility of a different story. That possibility is what theologian Ellen Cherry calls a peace proposal between Judaism and Christianity. Not just an armistice between believers, but a way for the traditions themselves to share God, so that God's world can flourish, not languish. On December 23rd, host Wade Frenson sits down with Ellen Cherry to explore how that proposal might become reality. Because if we are all created in the image of God, then learning to make peace in God's name may be how we finally learn to make peace with one another.
Welcome to the sneak peek for the pre-Christmas December 23rd episode, in which I have an eminent theologian who's recently retired or pre-retired. I don't want to really say retirement because she's working on a big project, but she's the emerita professor of theology at Princeton Theological Seminary. And she spent decades teaching systematic theology there, but her passion goes back to when she was 3, and as a little Jewish girl exploring her neighborhood, had an experience which awakened her that not everybody was Jewish. Tell us about where that seed was planted for the desire to bring people together.
Well, when I was 3 years old, being a nice Jewish girl, as the phrase goes, I discovered the Roman Catholic neighbors and their parish that was just right around the corner from where we all lived. And I realized that the world is a big place. And then I said to myself, well, God knows that it's a big place, and God loves it as a big place. And that what we can do to serve God is enable its plurality all to be understanding of one another and learn to love one another, that God's world may flourish, because God wants creation to flourish, not languish. And when we are at odds with one another, we languish and the creation languishes. And that's counter to God's desire for us and for his handiwork. So I've said myself, yeah.
Amen. We are the pinnacle of that creation created in the image of God, as the show title says. So you then were put in Hebrew school and you married a rabbi's son, but you eventually converted to Christianity and dedicated your life to Christian theology at the seminary. But now, having retired, you're embarking on your magnus opus, if you will, and you've been working on it for some time. Tell us about that.
Well, I am writing what I think is the first ever peace proposal for Judaism and Christianity. There have been long periods of armistice between Jews and Christians, between Christianity and Judaism. With the rise of anti-Semitism now, not only in the United States, but in Great Britain and in France and other parts of the world, I think we're coming to the end of more or less 300-year armistice between Jews and Christians. And with that, I think it's time to offer a genuine theological peace proposal. Not just that people should be respectful, that everyone has a right to their own religion, human rights, or religious freedom, which is new for the Roman Catholic Church, religious freedom, but that Judaism and Christianity, not Jews and Christians who marry each other and work together and employ each other and do all kinds of nice things together, but that the traditions themselves, the heritages themselves, make peace with one another and share God. And that is the book that I'm eagerly trying to finish and hope to get out soon for the public to consider.
And while we wait on that book, we can tune in at least on December 23rd at 8 p.m. Central Time for the show with Ellen Cherry that will unpack this over the course of an hour. That's a show you don't want to miss. I'm so excited about it, and I can't wait to share it with you. See you there.